It was interesting that I came back to Person County because I never intended to. I was one of those people that said I was never coming back to Person County when I left Person County. So I'm back here now doing something I love.
All right, so Mr. Bert Poole, it's a pleasure to have you. I always say that you're the most famous man in Roxborough because every time I see you at Walmart or somewhere, everybody's stopping you to talk to you. So it's a pleasure to be able to sit down and converse about some things with you today. Obviously you're well known for your work with Southern Middle School, with Men of Distinction, very respected in the community. And that's all because of the effort you put in with young people. And so we want to talk about that today in terms of how you got to that point of really becoming a community leader and what elements of your life and your character have developed you to be that. So first off, you are born and raised in Person County?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so tell me about your upbringing in this community.
I am a product of Person County, born and raised, like you said. Attended South Elementary. Didn't stay here through all elementary school because my dad was military, so I was educated somewhat in Hawaii. And I came back to Person County in the 6th grade. So I finished up 6th grade in Person County and then came to Southern Junior High at the time. And whole different atmosphere here then. We were taught in this building that what the teacher says is what was meant, and that was the case closed. If they called your parents, it was over and done with. It was no questioning of anything like that. So Person County, and graduated from Person High School in '83, where I was part of the band at Person, part of student council, book club, and several other things at the high school. But it was interesting that I came back to Person County because I never intended to. I was one of those people that said I was never coming back to Person County when I left Person County. So I'm back here now doing something I love. So that's just a little bit pieces.
Okay. So after you graduated from Person, you went to North Carolina A&T State University?
Yes, I went to the illustrious North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. Yes, and I majored in history education at A&T. A&T taught me so many different things about life. Coming from a predominantly white community and going to a historically black college and university was a big transition, where some things that we learned at North Carolina A&T were not taught in the public school systems here. So at A&T, I was very active in the gospel choir. I was part of the SGA and different organizations on campus. I was editor of the history magazine. So there were things that we did at A&T. I had the opportunity to march with the Greensboro Four, who started the sit-in movement on February 1st, 1960, for I think it was like the 35th anniversary of that movement, and to talk to them and hear from their aspect of what happened on February 1st, 1960. It just started to make an impact on different things that I started to see in life. The opportunity to sit down and talk to the Reverend Jesse Jackson, to go to A&T with both his sons, Jonathan and Jesse Jr., to meet several other famous alumni from A&T, to sit down with Dr. Warmoth T. Gibbs, who was the president of A&T in the 50s, and he died at 102, to hear him give a historical aspect of A&T. And it just involved in me that saying Aggie pride and why I love the university. So,
what were some of the things going on in society or in the world during your time at A&T that maybe A&T shaped your cultural perspective on the things going on around you? Can you think of anything that was going on during that time?
One of the major events that took place was the incidents was dealing with South Africa and the U.S. involvement with the finances in South Africa and the apartheid going on. So a lot of our things were telling the university, asking the university to take companies that were coming into the university who had money in South Carolina and not deal with them, in South Africa, and not deal with them. So we deal with a whole lot of that. We also dealt with what's going on in the world now, racial tension. You know, it was at one time where something had happened in the city, and it was right before the February 1st celebration or something, but the Klan had threatened to march on campus. So the students became the activists, and we blocked the campus so you couldn't march on the campus. So all those things, those are just two of the simple things that built me to understand that as a black man, basically, how do you say different but not different from what's going on? So, yeah.
All right, so after A&T, but before you get to Person County, what are your movements? What trajectory does your life take?
After I left A&T, I ended up in Charlotte, North Carolina. And even though my degree was in history, I ended up teaching special education in Charlotte for 6 years, dealing with orthopedically impaired, emotionally disabled students, all kinds of students, just dealing with all kinds of different students who had different disabilities. And I spent 6 years doing that, and I fell in love with our exceptional children. There are unique brand of individuals who I always used to make a joke and say, it's not our special ed kids who need the help, it's our regular ed kids who need the help, because our special ed kids have a joy for learning, while our regular ed kids act like sometimes they don't even care to learn.
So what perspectives about, let's say, the special education community did you gain that you think you've carried with you throughout your time as a teacher?
I think that special ed kids gave me the nurturing that I needed as an educator. They reached out for the love and the affection of a teacher that they knew that cared about them. So I think that they taught me more or less nurturing and the care. And they taught me that I can love somebody else's child without it being my child.
Right. Okay, so what brought you to Roxborough after leaving, being in Greensboro, being in Charlotte? What brought you home?
What actually brought me home was that my grandmother and her sister were getting elderly. And, it was like I didn't want to be 4 or 5 hours away and something happens to them. And so I made a decision to come back to Person County. And I came back, and one of those people, like I said, who never said I was coming back. And when I came back, I had no desire to go back into education. So I was like, I'll find something else to do. So that's how I ended up back home, basically because of my grandmother and her sister.
And what year was that?
Oh, my goodness. I want to say I came back to Person County in 96.
Okay.
96, 97, somewhere in there.
Did you get into anything else other than education when you first got here?
No, actually, I came
straight into the school
straight into the school system. I laid out for that summer when I moved back here, and by November, I was in Person County schools.
So what was your original role when you got back in the Person County school system?
Original role, I got hired as the in-school suspension coordinator, right directly here at Southern. So it was ironic when I came back in, my administrator at the time, the first day on the job, just walked me down the hallway and said, "This is your classroom." And he was telling me something else about the classroom and the students, and then he walked away. He said he'll be back, and he never came back. So I was thrust into taking charge in the classroom and letting them know that I was here as the in-school suspension coordinator. And he never came back after that, so it just evolved from that point on.
So you somewhat developed the role, I guess you could say, here at Southern from 96 to now 2020. You've kind of carved out, to some degree, what the in-school suspension coordinator really is, would you say?
I would have to say that I had to do some research to actually see what was supposed to transpire inside the classroom of in-school suspension. And I just followed that path. And I think that anybody who comes into an in-school suspension classroom, you are I'm not going to say dictator, but you have to have control in that classroom in order for the program to work. And I'm not going to say I carved it out. I think that I had got some advice from some other people that I had talked to from other systems and how they handle things. And I just incorporated my own ideas and concepts into what they had talked to me about.
At what point did you begin to see yourself as this is who I am, this is what I do, versus this is my job?
I've always had a passion for education ever since I was little. And so I was always that little boy, you know how you played school? I was always the one that had to be the teacher, and I would never be the student. So I think that being that I already had the love in me, it just more and more grew as I started working with these students in this building and seeing that I was making a positive change in some lives, because we can't change everybody, but in some lives I could see that I was making a difference. Okay,
how many principals have you worked under?
My goodness. I got to count. Jim Torrey, Maggie Rauschenberg, Laura Hodges, John McCain, Bill Boston, Hill, Tillett. I'm under my 8th principal right now.
So 24 years, 8 principals.
8 principals, and I don't even ask me to name assistant principals, so I can't do that.
But you are still steady in the role as ISS coordinator, and probably, are you the most tenured person right now at Southern Middle School?
There is one other teacher that has been here longer than I have at this point.
So, I mean, pretty much everybody who's come through Southern Middle School for the last 24 years, if they don't know anybody else,
they know me.
They know Mr. Poole.